societies in sustainable development from APS. No? Chi che parla?
Is this high enough? Good. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the organizers. It's really been a wonderful meeting. I'm addressing you from what looks like it must have been Fermi's original desk, I believe, in this room. So I'd like to just start by reminding us that today, as we convene in this lovely location in the north of Italy, that the crises that are engulfing the world, frankly, are not far away. They are right here on our very doorstep. Some represent long-standing challenges, including climate change, social justice, food security, and sustainable development. Others are new threats that have burst forth during the pandemic, ranging from misinformation and disinformation to conventional and nuclear war. The list is long and daunting. So how should scientific societies respond? Well, for APS, our mission is clear: to advance and diffuse the knowledge of physics. And physics, both basic and applied, is essential to addressing the world's challenges. That means that we physicists have a duty to step up, to face the challenges, to rise to the occasion. How? Well, at APS, we advance our mission by publishing scientific journals, hosting meetings. These activities are well known and essential to sustainable development, as we've heard here at this conference. But they're also essential to advancing and diffusing the knowledge of physics. But you and I know that we must do more, much more. And we must do it together, because so many of today's challenges are global in nature. Solving them will require substantial international communication, cooperation, and collaboration. And as physicists, we must harness our passion for science to address these global challenges. Science and technology offer a path forward, and basic science supports it all. Moreover, since our science is so international, we physicists have a special responsibility to work together. And that's one reason why I'm so happy to be with you here at this conference. Well, so what can we do? Well, I believe that as leaders, we must inspire our organizations to engage more deeply with the world around us. We have heard examples of this at this meeting. But one thing is clear. No matter how much we physicists value our research, we cannot just live in our labs. We need to get out and drive change. So the scientific societies among us have multiple avenues to pursue. We can, for example, produce technical reports on pressing topics of current interest. We can mobilize our members to advocate for change. We can work to change our culture, eliminating barriers to inclusion. And we engage in international activities to strengthen the global scientific community. So in what follows in the next few minutes, I'm going to say a few words about each. And I'll start with technical reports. Timely technical reports are one way that nonprofit science organizations can provide expert and unbiased advice on topics of current interest. At APS, we see this as an essential part of our mission, to harness the power of science in the service of larger societal issues. And by doing this work together, we highlight the role of physics in addressing national and international challenges. But frankly, to be more importantly, we strengthen the voice of science in the making of policy. To be blunt, if scientific organizations do not provide expert advice to governments, who will? In the US, if science organizations don't provide input, our government always turns to lawyers. And myself, I'm not sure I find that comforting. I mean, when I have a broken bone, I go to a doctor, not a lawyer. When my car needs to be fixed, I see a mechanic, not a lawyer. And so when the global climate is warming, I want our government to get the best scientific advice available. I believe it's our responsibility to provide that advice whenever we can. So at APS, we do provide such information, and not just on climate change. We advise on other issues as well, including research security, the liquid helium shortage, availability of elements that are critical to realizing a more energy-efficient future. I'll give you just one recent example. Working in partnership with Optica, the International Science Organization, we issued a report recently titled Monitoring Methane Emissions from Oil and Gas Operations. The report is being published simultaneously in our journals, Physical Review X Energy and Optics Express. So before one can mitigate methane emissions, one must first be able to monitor them accurately. The APS Optica report identifies several policy recommendations that would substantially strengthen the monitoring of methane released by the oil and gas sector. In fact, in recent years, it's become clear that a small number of emitters, called super emitters, are responsible for a significant fraction of the total methane emissions. And through enhanced detection, super emitters can be identified and leak quickly plugged, which would eliminate a large fraction of the methane emission into the atmosphere. So our report focused on the United States, but this is clearly a global issue, and to be entirely effective, global action is required. So while this report demonstrates the need for expert input into government policy, it also demonstrates the need for global scientific organizations like ours to work together to address global challenges. Now I'll turn to advocacy. APS reports are only as effective as our willingness to promote them. Therefore, advocacy is another activity that we believe is critical to the mission to advance and diffuse the knowledge of physics. So I'd like to provide you some perspective. In the US, the average congressional office receives hundreds of contacts every day from citizens in their state and their district. That makes for a lot of background noise. Advocacy is the only way for our message to cut through the noise. So organizations take different approaches to advocacy. At APS, our primary approach is to mobilize our 50,000 members, not only those in the US, but also the 12,000 who live in some 107 countries around the world. We provide our members with training and timely, focused requests for action. We are now at a point where we can mobilize hundreds, if not thousands, of APS members within 24 hours to make phone calls, send personalized messages, even take meetings with congressional critics. So every year we present an award to the physicists who help us the most. We call them our 5 Sigma physicists, to make the point that because of their work, our signal has risen above the noise in Washington. Let me give you an example of how this works. In the summer of 2020, the Trump administration issued an order that would permit international students to stay in the United States for a maximum of 4 years. After 4 years, the international students would have to pack their bags and leave. So there are many problems with that order, but let me state the obvious. It takes more than 4 years to get a PhD. So, in effect, the order was telling international students they are not welcome in the United States for their PhD. So at APS, we decided we needed to do whatever we could to oppose the Trump administration's order. To us, it was a straightforward call. The order stood in direct opposition to our mission to advance and diffuse the knowledge of physics. We could not let the Trump administration undermine the mobility of the global scientific community. And so we came up with a strategy to oppose it. So it turns out that in the United States, before an order can be implemented, a public comment period is required by law. And it's also required by law that each comment receive a response. So we determined that if we could flood the administration with comments, we could slow down the implementation of the order. And if we could slow it down long enough, Congress might have enough time to overrule it. Therefore, we mobilized the APS membership, asking our members both in the United States and around the globe to respond to the administration's request for public comment. And our members responded in remarkable numbers. By the time the public comment period was over, thousands and thousands of people had weighed in opposing the order. And in the end, it turned out that 1 out of 20 letters came from an APS member. We hit them with so many unique letters that implementation was delayed for just long enough. So I'm happy to say that in July of last year, the rule proposed by the Trump administration was officially overturned by the US Congress. So this little story shows how we can and must stand up for those in our community who may feel victimized or vulnerable. And it's at those times that our organizations, our members, can be a powerful voice for our community. And we can be better heard when we speak with a common voice. So I believe that our organizations are a powerful voice for physics and for physicists across the globe. So I'd like to talk a little bit about equity, inclusion, and education. These are 3 APS core values and 3 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Simply put, society benefits and the scientific community benefits from offering an environment in which anyone who is interested and able of pursuing a degree in science has that opportunity. Organizations like ours can help foster that environment. At APS, we believe it is a critical part of our mission to advance and diffuse the knowledge of physics. And it is for that reason we formed the APS Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Alliance, APS IDEA, which is an initiative designed to empower and support physics departments, laboratories, and other organizations to identify and share strategies for improving equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is not a US-focused activity. We found that our colleagues around the world would like to share this common desire, that all students of any gender, race, ethnicity, should have the opportunity to pursue their passion for science. And so, with the help of APS IDEA, physicists from 99 institutions in North and South America, Europe and Africa, and Australia are establishing a community of transformation, working to change the culture of our field. Nevertheless, as with so many of the tough global problems we face, good intentions and a commitment to change are not enough. For some students, particularly those from underrepresented groups in our community, an outstretched hand from a welcoming scientist can make all the difference. So we are also fostering mentoring relationships between physics mentors and Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous undergraduate students. These relationships serve as a welcoming bridge from where they are to the scientists they might become. I'll share just one story, perhaps because it's not just unique to students in the United States. Maybe you'll hear something familiar in his story. So Brian Zamaripa Roman found himself facing very hard times. This is a quote. He said, "I had to work at Burger King and sell used car parts to help make ends meet for my family." He recalled this as he was thinking about the poverty that his family faced and his struggle to help them. His jobs helped his family, but working so much outside school left him little time for studying. Another quote, I was in an engineering program and ended up with a D in my first design course. Then I switched my major to physics, and I found that I excelled. But when he went in search of PhD programs, the burden of his family was too much. But fortunately, Brian's story does have a happy ending. And through an APS mentoring program, Brian found a mentor who helped him find a future in our discipline. So in reflecting on the challenges that he had to overcome and the opportunity that the mentoring program provided, he said, I would have been on the streets without this program. And he added this observation: we are community, and I appreciate that I am not alone. So those are very simple words, but they're also very profound words, I think. No, Brian is not alone, and yes, Brian, we are part of a community, and we are a community that can change lives and become stronger in the process. Oh, I got behind on my slides. International affairs. Perhaps you've heard something familiar in Brian's story, or in some of the other stories I've told. I think they show that our challenges in the United States are not unique. And through collective action, we can effectively address them, no matter where we live. Now, at APS, as host of some of the largest physics meetings in the world, and as a significant publisher of physics journals, I think we have a special responsibility. We need to do what we can to enable the global physics community to share our activities and to access and contribute to our journals and to join with us to address our shared challenges. There's a phrase we use to capture that perspective. It is our aim to enable APS to be what we call a welcoming global hub, an organization that is open to physicists from around the world. The idea that APS should live up to its responsibilities and become a welcoming global hub is not mine alone. It's based on the recommendations of a task force that I chaired a few years ago. And I'd like to acknowledge Luisa Cifarelli, one of the meeting organizers who served on the task force. And likewise, I'd like to acknowledge Joe and Angela, who also helped us along these lines through their participation and their service in our Committee on International Scientific Affairs. So thank you. I really would like to thank you for helping develop what I now regard as a primary APS goal and a natural part of our mission to advance and diffuse the knowledge of physics. So I see APS's role as complementary to the national and regional organizations like SIF and EPS, in which physicists already see great value. In fact, by working with these organizations, I hope that together we can provide an opportunity for all physicists, regardless of race, nationality, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, to contribute to and benefit from the global physics enterprise. That together we can provide an opportunity for physicists at all levels of prosperity and achievement to build and strengthen relationships within the international physics community. And that together we can provide an opportunity to expand partnerships and collaborations to address shared challenges. So how can we foster collaborations to address our shared challenges? Well, one way is for APS to join with other physics institutions to reinforce the critical role that physics plays in sustainable development. And that's what we're doing right here at this meeting. Another way is for APS to work with other physics organizations to highlight the centrality of physics to the quantum revolution. And that is what we're doing right now under the able leadership of Joe, preparing to propose to UNESCO and the UN that 2025, the 100th anniversary of quantum mechanics, be designated as the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. And some 28 organizations from 26 countries have already endorsed this proposal, demonstrating once more that there is great strength in numbers. And the third way for APS to foster collaboration is to create a space for physics leaders to sit down together, roll up their sleeves, and mobilize the global physics community to address issues that affect us all. So later this year, APS will be convening a roundtable of physics society leaders with additional participation from ICTP and Iupac. This group was first convened by the UK Institute of Physics during the early days of the pandemic. For 2022, APS will take the baton and lead the group in its next series of roundtable discussions. This group has already considered a selection of topics for its upcoming meetings, and one topic stood out: open science and research security. From initial discussions, I learned that physicists in the US are not alone in having to face growing concern by government leaders over espionage, the theft of scientific research, and the fear that academia is too lax in the enforcement of research security principles. But an overreaction by any one government to research security threats, both perceived and real, endangers the openness and mobility of the entire global scientific community. So this, again, is something we should be working on together to help set a productive path that strikes an appropriate balance between the free and open collaboration that underlies basic research and the legitimate restrictions that follow from intellectual property and national security concerns. In fact, I believe that this group can provide ongoing benefit, and I hope that the participants will consider establishing it as a standing body, the Global Physics Society Roundtable. Because by working together, I think we can create a more welcoming, diverse, and impactful global voice for physics, and that together we will build a better world. So as I said at the start, the world is facing many challenges, and we physicists can and must play an important role in addressing them. We bring technical expertise, for sure, but we also bring considerable experience in working across borders, for example, at Cern. And in a moment of increasing international tension, I think that is more important than ever. So I'd like to thank the organizers once more for bringing us together, a step that helps us realize the final UN Sustainable Development Goal, to strengthen partnerships. Because it is through meetings like this that our community renews itself and builds even deeper connections. We share common interests in separating fact from fiction, advocating for responsible science-based policies, building a more equitable and inclusive community, and seeking responsible solutions to global challenges. There is much common ground. And if you indulge me one last thought, I'll return to the words of Brian Zamaripa Roman. He said these words when looking back on a life, on what could have been a tragic life, cut off too soon, living on the streets. But physics gave him hope, and physics gave him a new life. So I find his words to be universal. I believe in his words, and I would like to share them now as if they were my own. We are a community, and I appreciate that I am not alone. So I'd like to challenge each and every one of us to find new and more effective ways to work together, to create new partnerships with each other, to ensure a better and much more sustainable world. Thank you.
You said that the US government turns to lawyers.
Yeah.
But there is a science advisor and a science office at the White House. And the advisors change from president to president, but they are, in general, quite remarkable scientists. They do not advise.
So the science advisor does advise. The science advisor under Biden, for the first time, is a member of the cabinet. So the position's been elevated, but it's also been empty for most of the Biden administration. There's now a proposal for a new science advisor who's been proposed to Congress, but the Senate must confirm, and the Senate is not in any hurry to confirm this person. So most of the power in the government is held by lawyers, for sure.
When you said that you organize roundtables, then those are somehow recorded and made available to interested people, since, of course, the attendance may be vast, but it's always limited.
Right. So the roundtables, well, the picture was for a discussion that was held in Washington with part of our annual meeting, the photo you saw. The roundtable I was describing isn't matched by the picture. It's been a convening of that group, and the group typically then will talk privately to have frank discussions, but at the end issue some sort of a statement. So the first statement issued by the group was in support of the Sustainable Development and the Glasgow Conference. That was the statement engineered by IOP. We will try to be working on a statement regarding essentially the rules of the road for international research collaborations. And many governments are starting to propose those rules, and it would be nice for our community to stand up and say, no, these are rules that work for us and can perhaps be the basis then of the national policies that are being developed. I think that's the hope. So the output is public, please.
Yeah, John.
There was a follow-up on that question.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Is it follow-up?
Yes. Well, I had a question. Very rapid. Excuse me. Please.
Oh, it wasn't a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Since
No. It's about this roundtable. So it's a very nice initiative. I mean, to have some physicists. I mean, talking and addressing. I mean, the question of research security and also to know how we can increase cooperation between every country we want. We are physicists. I mean, we want also to have a global view of this question. And to have a global view, I mean, you need also to have at this roundtable some representatives of the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs, for instance.
Of where?
The Secretariat, the Foreign Office. I mean, you have some experts also having some ideas about what is permitted or not, what can be tolerated or not. And also it would be good to have some representatives of the DOD, Department of Defense. I mean, the people who prevent physicists from collaborating between each other. I mean, there are some deep reasons that prevent physicists from exchanging freely as they want. And it's good to have at the round table every representative of each community. So do you plan to have such a broad panel, or do you plan to have only the opinion of physicists on this question?
So I think we're still trying to start with a manageable size. It's still approximately 20 people. I think that each organization should do its homework and, for example, speak to people in its own government. And we will be certainly reaching out to sister science societies as well, for sure. In the United States, much of this discussion is also happening at the level of the National Academies of Science, and I've already spoken with them, and also the AAAS as well. So we certainly want to be aligned. But we physicists have an enormous amount of experience to offer about how global collaborations work. So I think if we can agree, that's a very powerful voice.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe the question is for both of you now. So these goals of sustainable development, some of them are more global than others. Some are more urgent than others. So if we take we agree on a priority list, wouldn't it be a good idea that major physics society get together and have a joint action and joint position on these priority lists? Am I saying something that you guys are doing already? Sometimes. Okay, let me listen to the...
Here.
On behalf of the EPS, what can happen is that we at the EPS look after some particular cases when we know some people being persecuted in such countries or such other. We discreetly work with other learned societies, for instance, the APS, in order to help this colleague and his family. But we do that in such a way that the family of this guy in his country is not persecuted. So what I want, the message I want to say that when we have to intervene from a diplomatic point of view, we try to be discreet and not to draw up a list, okay? For this is the only action we have at the moment. No, it's not this question, so please.
Let's take the major countries or region, they have physical society. And if now we agree that there are more, and I think climate change is one of the most urgent maybe, that you get together and have a common position, a common action to be implemented. That's my point. He's tried to get all these big society to work together and announce and show that there is a common position on these things. I can think a little bit more about it, but I need to know, but you know what is your perimeter of action as a society, and you use this perimeter to the limit with other society. APS is a well-organized society also, and yeah, it's just joint forces. It may have higher impact globally.
Different countries on such questions related to the climate change. We had, some kind of statement of position paper written by the DPG, for instance, and IOP, or about diversity and reduction of the gender gap. We do that with the IOP. Okay, so we have some actions, and probably I forgot, but we have also some actions with the APS.
So the roundtable did issue a statement, but it got lost. It was not promoted effectively. So that's a lesson to learn and an opportunity to go back and do it again. One thing we're working on at APS is to try to enlarge the definition of physics to our community as well. We have a community that's very focused in on what individuals are doing. And people don't see those connections as much to the things like the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we are working on amplifying that as well.
Thank you again for a stimulating talk. And I would like to add one thing. I think we all experience these difficulties in speaking to the government, this barrier that the lawyer come and give us to us. For this reason, I think that among the various things that also APS is doing, or American Physical Society and so on, I think that we should start our thinking more in the long term. As yesterday we saw that Salam was saying, well, how can I spend such money? And then in the end, the obvious result is in the school, in trying to put educational part. I think that a big effort that we should do is not only towards the government where the difficulties are there, but also a lot of effort in the educational part with the students since the beginning of their career in the school. In this sense, the proposal of being community that you are sharing is something that we should emphasize and strengthen even more in the future. I make an example. It's very nice when the International Physics Particle Outreach Group organized this International Cosmic Day, where schools from the America, from Canada, from Brazil, from Europe joined together in one day, making a small experiment and expressing, presenting the results like a big conference. So I would like only to stress again that this effort, which sure is done in America, in European Physical Society, in Italy, and so on, should be even more emphasized in the future. We should look at the present, but also at the future in 10, 20 years, and then try to see and have some fruits also in that moment.
Thank you. So we are certainly investing in the education of physics teachers in particular, and also trying to elevate the status of the profession of physics teacher within our community as a step in that direction.
Any other question?
What about the link with industry? I mean, you have some actions in order to recruit more industrial partners, but you didn't address that.
Yes.
Could you please tell us more? Briefly.
So when I talk about being more inclusive in physics, I'm also talking about, as you were, Luke, about the importance of connecting to industry, because in the end of the day, that is a major way to have a big lever on our impact towards sustainable development. So we are working hard at trying to figure out what the industrial community wants from us. What I've heard from our group is that what they primarily want is access to our students so that they can hire them. But we are definitely working on trying to redefine what it means to be a member of APS. It doesn't mean to be a professor and to plunk down $100 a year. It means something else, and I'm not yet sure what it means, but we need to figure that out.
Last one.
Sure. Did APS issue some kind of guidance with respect to collaboration with Russian institutes? Since in Europe we had number of different decisions, different approaches, and I am familiar with the NASA one, but I'm curious to know if you issue some kind of guidance.
We only guide our own activities, and we have a high-level statement, but the details, of course, is where it starts to get murky and falls down. We believe in supporting the international physics community, individuals who carry out our field. So we are not boycotting individual Russian scientists for anything they do or say, just like we didn't boycott Israeli physicists when Israel invaded the Gaza or Lebanon. We did not boycott American physicists when America invaded Iraq on the basis of, quite specious reasoning. So no, we do not boycott individual physicists or sanction them. However, we are suspending our institutional connections to Russia at this time and Belarus. What does that mean? We don't really have very many. And so it was an easy statement to make. And it was trying to walk the middle ground. The most obvious place where that comes into play is we were hoping to involve the Russian Academy of Sciences in marshalling countries for the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology, and we will not be doing that. So then you can look at each of our activities. There are strong sanctions from the US government that we have to obey, And so it seems that we should not be allowing employees of those institutions to attend our meetings. It's not totally clear, but I think that's where it's coming down. We are still letting them publish. So the details are the devil's in the details. So we're trying to walk in the middle, but trying to uphold physicist-to-physicist communication as really essential to digging our way out of the crisis in the long term.
Okay, thanks again to Jonathan Bagger for the interesting discussion. And now I call Charlotte Varacaule, Cern Director of International Relations on the societal impact and value on fundamental research, the experience of Cern.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you again for the invitation. I was wondering, maybe we move the table? Because in order to avoid that I look like a tennis match looking at you and looking at my slides, I will be looking at the slides from here. Well, first of all, let me again thank the organizers, Angela and the organizing committee, for the honor of being invited to be here today. I can't even believe I'm in these hallowed halls and looking out at the lake and speaking on such an incredible topic as the value and impact of fundamental research. It's of course also a very important occasion, the 125th anniversary of the Italian Physical Society, and we mark the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, which is really a topic very close to my heart. So it's really for all those reasons I'm really honored to be here today. I'm also incredibly intimidated because of the history and the legacy of this place, intimidated because of the fantastic talks we heard yesterday and also the incredible talk this morning by Jonathan. I thought that was just incredible, so impressive, so inspiring in terms of the examples of what fundamental research brings to the world, but also inspiring in terms of what we can do better together in order to get that impact better known and to get that better operationalized also in a societal context. I'm also intimidated because I am speaking about fundamental research while being a diplomat. I have come to working at Cern from a long career with the United Nations, so I bring a more policy-oriented perspective, if you will. And I oversee at Cern the relations with our member states, associate member states, observers, non-member states. So the diplomatic relations of the organization, everything that's education, communication, and outreach. So really the external relations of the organization. So I hope that brings a different perspective to the talks today. I hope it can complement the fantastic talks that we've had so far. So with that caveat, let me start. Now, I will be speaking about the different pathways when it comes to societal impact. And we have 4 that we identify. First and foremost, of course, the research as a common global good. Then collaboration. We've spoken a lot about collaboration. Of course, that is an important pathway to societal impact. Technology and innovation. We've heard a lot of fantastic examples about how the technology and the innovation that comes out of fundamental research really has a deep societal impact. I think we have also heard in many of the talks that there's a need to make that better known, better understood, better integrated. And then, of course, also education, training, skills development, impact through people has come up in many, many talks. I was particularly impressed yesterday by Annie's talk about Armenia and talking about the incredible resource that young people are there. And I think this is also a pathway to harness. So I will be speaking specifically about the pathways through collaboration, technology, innovation, and education and training. And then I will be, in the latter part of the talk, really be talking about the Sustainable Development Goals as a unifying framework that allows us to bring those different pathways together so that we can target and be more strategic about the impact that we have, but also communicate more effectively on it. So a couple of words on research, and of course it's with great trepidation that I say a few words about what Cern does as a non-physicist in a hall full of physicists, so I will be very quick with this, you will notice, as I go through it. Of course, Cern is the world's largest laboratory for particle physics, and our goal is to understand the most fundamental particles and laws of the universe. We try to figure out what the universe is made of studying the fundamental constituents of matter and the forces that control them. You will all be very familiar with this particular image. And of course, we use that because we want to understand how the universe has evolved over time, in particular, trying to understand the first fractions after the Big Bang. And this is where we use our tools of the trade, which are particle accelerators. And we've heard a lot about the societal impact of accelerator technology yesterday in particular. So we develop technologies in 3 key areas. That is really the basis of societal impact: particle accelerators, particle detectors, and of course also large-scale computing. And I will be coming back to that in a little bit more detail later. But I want to start with the impact that we have through collaboration, and I think that dovetails beautifully, I think, with the talk we just had in terms of the value of collaboration, and also the very, very interesting discussion we just had about how can we work better together in order to make sure that the value of fundamental research is better understood and helps also to inform policy debates, both at a national level and at an international level. And just a quick reminder of the collaboration at Cern. Cern was founded as an intergovernmental organization in 1954, initially by 12 European states. We now have 23 member states, not specifically limited anymore to Europe, though the majority of the membership is European. We have 10 associate member states, and there you will see that we also now have a number of states outside of Europe, Pakistan and India being among them. And you will see, of course, also that we have Ukraine as one, which is a very, very important one at the moment. And we have a number of observers, and since we just spoke about the current global situation, you can see that Russia and the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research are currently suspended from their observer status. This is one of the actions that has been taken by the Cern Council in response to the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, aided by Belarus on the 24th of February. But I want to highlight in particular here the 50 collaboration agreements that we have with non-member states and territories. We heard very nicely yesterday in the talk around ICTP. Why should developing countries be interested in fundamental research? And I think it's interesting to see here that we have quite a number of countries here that are in the developing country category. Some of them are also on the OECD DAC list. And they are actually engaging with CERN with fundamental research because they see that fundamental research is a driver of innovation and of skills development. And they are looking to see how they can engage in order to strengthen fundamental research in their particular countries. And of course, we have a user community of about 12,000 people from around the world. And if we dig a little bit deeper again, we see some interesting numbers here. About half of the users are from our member states, a small proportion also from our associate member states, a very large number from the observers. And then again, about 10% here from the non-member states and territories, again, which testifies to an interest in fundamental research. And we see particular growth in the communities in Asia and in Latin America at the moment. And we hope very much also we will be able to help stimulate some momentum in Africa. And we're very much also looking for partners to help do that. So this is, of course, the CERN model has been very powerful and has helped also to inspire beyond the world of physics. Of course, the LHC experiments themselves are particular models of collaboration. I think we have also discussed the value of physics collaboration here. Sesame has been mentioned. The CERN model has been very powerful in terms of the governance of Sesame, and of course, CERN has also been involved at a technical level in development and construction of the infrastructure, and several of our directors general have served as presidents of the Sesame Council. So there's a very strong relationship between CERN and Sesame, and again, both in a practical way, but also as an inspiration in terms of the model. And also CERN provides IT infrastructure for satellite imaging for certain parts of the UN system. This is a very long-standing partnership. Over 15 years, we have hosted this facility at CERN so that we allow also our model of collaboration and our infrastructure to serve the global community at a broader level where it's possible. We spoke, I think also came up in the talk just now, that open science is a very important value for all of us, and it's really a driver of the collaboration, and it's an underlying, it's really the foundation of how we work. CERN has a number of initiatives, a number of policies in this area, an open access policy from 2014, which means that over 90% of publications coming out of the infrastructure are now in open access journals. And of course, the SCOPE consortium that many of you will be familiar with has been a very powerful model to drive that forward. And already and lately in 2020 also the LXC experiments have published an open data policy that will also allow them to bring more data into the public domain, and again to allow the openness of the lab to serve more broadly. Now, we spoke, and I think I really think that dovetails very nicely with the talk that's just preceding mine, in terms of advocacy. And I think also there is a particular role at a global level, and I think maybe there are some opportunities where some of us can work closer together when it comes to advocacy at a global level. Cern has observer status with the General Assembly. We've had that since 2012, and I was inspired by the discussion on the roundtables and how maybe policy relevant guidance can come out of those, and maybe it's possible to join forces there and also channel some of that guidance through, for example, the observer status at the UN. It provides another platform. Again, if we join forces in these different communities, I think we can have a stronger voice also at a global level. And of course, in particular, we are very much engaged when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that will be the second part of the talk, will be exactly on that. Now, we heard yesterday some very powerful examples of how technology serves society at a global level, and of course, this is no different at Cern. I'll just come with a couple of examples before I move on. Of course, the classical example, the birthplace of the World Wide Web, but many, many other areas as well, where the technology development really drives innovation in a number of areas. This is our knowledge transfer tools. I think it's very important to look at how we do that at different levels, both in terms of empowering individuals at Cern to consider how their work can have an impact on society. There's seed money also, and also we try to generate and support entrepreneurship both at the lab, but also in our member states and associate member states. So there's an ecosystem of activities around knowledge transfer in order to allow the technology development that we drive really to serve society as widely as possible. And of course, we had a very nice talk yesterday about Gìugno by Sandro Rossi. So I will not necessarily go into the details of this, but of course, medical applications is one of the areas where particle physics has had the most profound impact on a societal level in terms of course, therapy, proton, ions, electrons. This is what we heard about yesterday, but also in imaging, medical imaging and diagnostics. PET technologies were developed also at Cern in collaboration with the local hospital in Geneva in the 70s. This is now continuing with pixel technologies. You see here an image of a 3D color X-ray from a startup that was also supported by Cern using pixel technologies developed for our experiments. And then also, of course, the production of radioisotopes for support in biomedical research. The underlying principles here really again are open collaboration, it's open software, and it's open hardware. These are just some of the examples in terms of, oops, that was too fast. It's a little bit temperamental, no? Right, trying to get the pointer rather than, so we spoke yesterday also about radon and how that is a particular global challenge also when it comes to health, and there are also some of the detection technologies that have developed at Cern have helped also to drive innovation in this area. We also work on machine learning for car automation. We actually have a partnership with Volvo around this for self-driving cars. And of course also accelerated technologies are particularly powerful also when it comes to research into art and to understanding the layers, for example, of paintings, etc. And there we're working also with a number of partners, including INFN, to make accelerators more compact so that it's possible also for more museums to have these accelerators and they don't necessarily have to send the artworks to where the accelerators are. Right, so the third pathway is really impact through people. I think this is something that has come up very significantly throughout the day. Here you see a plot that shows the age distribution of the scientists working at Cern. We see here a peak at 27, and this is because of all the PhD students that are doing their research at Cern. Again, just like ICTP, Cern is not a degree-giving institution, but PhD students come from institutes around the world in order to do their research at the infrastructure, and then they're giving their degree by their home institution. Of course, most of us are very, very encouraged that the tail continues. It seems that physics is also a very, very healthy discipline, so we can continue for a long time. But we can, of course, also see here that not everybody stays in the discipline. So where do they go? And we've done a survey of this in terms of where our scientists, our young scientists, go after they've done their PhDs. And we can see here that 45% go into industry, which is an incredible also impact societal, in terms of societal impact, academia and research, and of course also government. So it's not just the lawyers that sit in government, you also have some physicists in some places, maybe they don't have enough impact yet, but I don't think we should lose hope, because they do actually go to government as well, with all the values and all the skills that come from fundamental research. We have, of course, also education and training at other levels. Just to highlight here, of course, again, the undergraduate summer student programs, the PhD students, technical fellows, etc. Also the high school teachers, I'll come back to them in a little bit more detail later, visitors, and we also now are building an education and outreach center that will open next year, that will double our capacity for bringing visitors on site, and will also allow us to have programs for children down to the age of 5. So far, we've had programs only from high school level and up. And I think it also came through in the discussion yesterday that it's important for us to broaden our programs so that we reach children at a younger age in order to inspire them and in order to empower them when it comes to science. And this is what we're trying to do also with the Science Gateway. Now, these are 4 important pathways for societal impact. I think we have all discussed them over the past days. And here I want to really advocate that the SDGs provide a very important and powerful platform for us to be more strategic and more targeted when it comes to this societal impact. And it also provides an important narrative for us to speak to decision makers, because this is a language that they are dealing with at the moment. So it allows us maybe to make some connections that we have not been able to make quite so powerfully in the past. Now, at Cern, what we have done is actually include an explicit commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals in the management objectives for the current mandate of the Director General, which runs from 2021 to 2025. One of the key objectives is exactly to increase the impact and the benefit of membership at Cern for our member states and our associate member states. And when it comes to that impact, it is also important that the benefits allow us to help promote the Sustainable Development Goals. And I want to just highlight here that, that we want to do that by building on the Cern values, the Cern competencies, and the Cern technology. So there are really 3 pillars to that. But it's the first time for us as an infrastructure that we have made such a clear and unequivocal commitment to the SDGs, and we have tried to cascade that into the organization in order to target our activities better. So in terms of the implementation principles and strategy from this overarching commitment, we have 5 principles that drive and help us prioritize activities, and they are complementarity. So we want to capitalize on our current strengths. We're not trying to reinvent ourselves or to go where others are already doing something and doing it better than us. We want to have an accumulative effect. We want to build on existing initiatives and calibrate them, so we don't allocate additional resources to this. We try to do what we do better in order to feed into the SDG agenda. We're working in a cross-cutting manner, so we try to prioritize activities that allow us to target several goals at the same time. Inclusion is very important. Obviously, we want to facilitate impact for member states and associate member states, but also for non-member states. So we try to broaden the initiatives to the extent possible so they have the widest possible impact. And we want to partner in the process, and I'll come back to that in a little bit, because I think that's particularly important also coming back to the talk of this morning in terms of the partnerships, both within our own discipline, but also to partners outside. So based on this, we have done a mapping of the goals in order to identify those where we have the greatest capacity to make a difference. Again, we don't want to, we want to work with our particular strengths and our advantages rather than try and step where others do things better than us. So We have a mapping that we did an initial mapping actually in 2017 where we identified 5 goals that we were contributing to or where we tried to tailor some of our activities. And then we redid that mapping in 2021 and we added 2 goals to those that we're working on, in particular SDG 5 and SDG 7 in order to align more closely with the objectives that were set by management for this current mandate of the Director General. And you can see them here, SDG 3 for health, SDG 4 education, 5 gender, 7 energy, 9 innovation, and then 16 and 17, which is peaceful societies, collaboration, and also partnerships, which is number 17. And here you see some of the examples. I'll come back to some of them in a little bit more detail. So this is a tool really for prioritization. I think it comes back also to the point about how do we prioritize, which ones are the most important ones. And I think there will be different views on that depending on where you're coming from. We're coming to it from a research infrastructure point of view, and we're looking at where can we have the greatest impact given our competencies. Maybe there will be different answers to the priority discussion in different contexts. Now, I want to just speak a little bit about partnerships because I think we've spoken a lot about partnerships amongst ourselves. I think we're very good at that. I think we can get even better. But I think also it's very important for us to try and strengthen the partnerships that we have outside, because it doesn't necessarily work just to speak amongst ourselves. We also need to be able to speak to others in order to reach further. And we have a number of partners and networks that we're working with. This is just a selection. Of course, the UN system is a particularly powerful one. This also came through in Jonathan's talk just now. And we have a number of formal collaboration agreements with entities within the UN system. And then now, when we're looking at new partnerships, we're actually using the SDGs as a prism to see whether this is a partnership that makes sense. Is it a partner with whom we can make we can create interesting programs or initiatives that will help us advance the goals. Now, I just want to flag a couple of examples, if you will, of activities that specifically speak to the priorities that we have set. And then I have a couple of concluding reflections, because I think I'm also running out of time. I'm looking at the moderator. I have 4 minutes. The Technology Impact Fund was an initiative that was established last year, which is a fund where we seek donor funding outside of the Cern budget in order to bridge the gap between technology that's developed at Cern and their applications in society. And this is where we're using the Cern and Society Foundation to seek funding outside to bridge the gap. And the first technology that has been selected for the technology fund is the compact precision laser inclinometer, which was initially intended to measure ground movements around the Atlas detector, but also has potential to become an early warning system for seismic events, but it needs further development. So we're now looking for donors that can help us take that further in order to make it more compact and also make reading of the results more easily accessible in real time. We work a lot on challenge-based innovation. These are really educational programs for bachelor's and master's students, where we're working with institutes in particular in our member states, where we invite master levels students to come and build prototypes around challenges set by a number of international organizations. So they're working on SDG-related challenges and they create prototypes in order to address specific challenges. So far, over 1,200 students have come through the program and over 200 prototypes have been produced. We're still assessing, if you will, the impact and the longevity of this, because of course you can do a lot of hackathons, etc., but what's the long-term impact? And there we are assessing also that over the longer term. We have also had for many years a very important program of donation of computer equipment to developing countries. We have since 2012 donated over 2,500 servers and 150 network switches to a number of countries. You see them listed here. I think importantly, in addition to the actual just donation of the infrastructure, which is important in its own right, there's an important capacity building component to this as well, because training comes with the servers that are donated. So it also allows young researchers to come to Cern and for experts to go to the countries and to help them use the infrastructure, and that also helps build capacity in the process. And then we have also programs around citizen science. This is, of course, where support for the SDGs on a practical level meets also outreach goals. And we have here a partnership around crowdsourcing of ideas for tackling the SDGs, in particular around climate action. The teacher program is an important multiplier for us, and this comes back again to trying to address capacity building at different levels. And the teacher program has run now since 1998. Every year we have about 1,000 teachers that come through from over 65 countries. About 25 to 30% are from non-member states. And you see here also that we have them in different languages, now also online. And we also have a gender-inclusive teaching model so that we can help the teachers teach in a way that is inclusive. And I think that also speaks to the important aspect around inclusion, equity that we spoke about earlier. And then we have a very powerful summer student program. Half of our summer students every year are from non-member states. And you will see here that we have, if I can make the pointer work, 22 of the selected students are from lower income countries, and of these 29 are female. So again, a very important and powerful tool also to empower students from developing countries. And then the final example is our digital libraries, which is a program we have run now for a while for capacity building when it comes to information technology and access to research. We've run that with UNESCO. We have done 5 editions so far. This is really focused on open access and open knowledge to allow researchers in the African continent to access better knowledge, but also, very importantly, to allow research that comes from Africa to be recognized better in the repositories so that it also gains a higher level of visibility. Now, just a couple of reflections to conclude, and then, of course, we will have some discussion. That we all know this, that there's a very, very deep societal impact through fundamental research. We've seen it throughout the last couple of days, but I think also it's important that we always highlight the values of science, collaboration, openness, excellence, the inspiration that provides to young people and to society, and the practical models of collaboration are really, really very powerful, and we should not be shy about highlighting also the values of research and how we work together. And the Sustainable Development Goals really provide an overarching framework within which we can dock our activities, and provides a very powerful narrative for us to tap into. It's a narrative that is recognized by decision makers, but it's also a narrative that is very much adopted by the younger generations. And in order to attract and generate interest in our fields, it's very, very important that we can also speak to the societal impact, because that also matters to the younger generation. Now, the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development is, of course, a powerful platform to let a lot of that come through. I think we've seen that here over the last 2 days. It does require an effort. It may require aligning activities. It may require recalibrating. It may be requiring changes in how we communicate and how we engage. It may also require reaching out to communities and to partners that we have not been so good at discussing with in the past. But it's certainly a very powerful tool for us also to make the value of fundamental research be better recognized. And I will leave the last word with the Secretary General of the United Nations, that science is really the ultimate ally in achieving the goals. And I think all of us are very much committed to allowing science to play that role. Thank you very much. Do you need a...
Very nice talk, thank you. So you mentioned teacher training, and I remember I've been directing a program at UNESCO for science teachers, and that's often something that member states asked for. They obviously understand the importance of that. But we had a meeting at one time with Cern, between UNESCO, Cern, and ICTP, on working together on teacher training, and never really went anywhere. Do you know if there's something that's in the works for that, working with UNESCO directly, let's say?
I'm not aware of that, but I think it's a very interesting point to bring up. I also, because we're now also working both on bringing the teachers back on site, but also continuing a lot of the online modules that were developed during the pandemic. I think it would be interesting to see if there's a way to join forces. For example, for the online component, maybe there's something that we can explore in more detail.
Sure, thanks.
So you made a very powerful point that the Sustainable Development Goals provide a framework and a language to talk about the impact of physics. Can you tell me, CERN is a totally global organization, so you have a good view of the entire world. Are these goals embraced globally? You don't hear very much about them in the US. You hear a lot about them here in Europe. How widespread really is that framework?
I don't have data to that effect, but I know that when it comes to the multilateral platforms, for example, all the parts of the UN system, everything is calibrated around the Sustainable Development Goals. So certainly at the diplomatic level, I think it's very powerful. Instinctively, I would assume that there will be some countries where it's easier to absorb. I also know of countries that have, even within their diplomatic services, reorganized their portfolio, so they're working not necessarily by organization, but by goals. So they are trying to restructure how they even do their diplomatic work. I think it's very powerful in a European context. I think also in the African continent and Asia. Whether it's quite the same in the US, I don't know, but certainly in this part of the world, it is a very, very powerful narrative. And it's a particularly powerful narrative when it comes to the multilateral scene.
Thanks a lot, for this talk. It was very clear. I had a question for you. Thanks for this talk, and thanks also to the Cern for giving us, the opportunity to have so many collaborations with the European Physical Society. In September, you are going to host a hands-on session at Idea Square, organized by the Technology and Innovation Group on software and so on. So we contribute together to form and train our students. I had a question for you concerning the structure dedicated to entrepreneurship. You mentioned at
Yes.
the beginning of your talk. How many people have you in this kind of structure? And have you a kind of incubator to form PhD students, postdocs, to create their startups and so on?
It's a very good question. So there are different levels to the support for entrepreneurship. There's the support for entrepreneurship in member states, for example, through the business incubation centers. So there are structures set up with support from CERN in our member states, because the priority goes to the member states. So those are, if you will, incubators in country, not at CERN. So this is one avenue. Then there is the support for those at CERN, so young, particularly young researchers that have ideas that may need to leave CERN when they've done their doctorate or for other reasons. So there are courses run for them at CERN. So there's a series of talks about entrepreneurship where entrepreneurs are invited to come around themes so that interested colleagues at CERN, users as well as staff, can come and listen to that. Then we have a dedicated also entrepreneurship program for master students. This is supported outside of the CERN budget by the CERN and Society Foundation, working with certain universities to bring, again, master students on site for looking at how they can use CERN technologies. And this is, of course, also part of what happens at Idea Square, where you have master students come for the challenge-based innovation programs. I think it's also very important to note that there's a lot of support for entrepreneurs, even outside of these formal frameworks. You saw the wristwatch using, so this was color X-ray using pixel technologies. It's a startup from New Zealand, which is neither a member state or an associate member state. But it was a startup that had an interesting vision that could use some of the technologies. And then there was ad hoc support for them also from CERN to allow that, because it's very important that the technologies serve society. We're not trying to keep them for ourselves or to monetize them. The most important thing is that they get out. So it's at different levels, both institutionally and also, if you will, on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, we've seen yesterday a very concerning point, which is if you look to Africa, Africa is a really, the least I can say is a concern. Nothing is changing for decades. We've seen a number of publications, science is almost inexistent. And CERN is a knowledge organization. and at the same time very powerful. Is there any way to think out of the box and use the Cern as a knowledge organization that has member state and who are close to government to make it that we, the member state, are conscious that it's not, we cannot continue this way, and some of the member states like UK and France have a huge influence in Africa. So maybe there is something to be done. I don't have a clear idea what, but still within the perimeter of Cern, just saying that it cannot be. I know Cern is very active on getting some African countries involved, but it's a drop in an ocean, because it has to be on the level where the government has to increase the budget for education and for research, maybe education first. So is there anything you can push there? I think it's it's not political, it's very political, we know, but from Cern, it could be another way to get to some pressure on politicians. I don't know.
I think you raise a very important point also. I spoke about the growth that we see, and we see most of the growth in terms of looking for more institutional relations with Cern in Latin America and in Asia, and not so much in Africa. We have recently had some potential interest in maybe associate membership, very, very mildly expressed by, for example, Egypt, Morocco, sort of just some initial ideas. That might be able to then pull others with them. As you know, we are involved in a number of activities, but very much on an ad hoc basis. And I think we would be very interested in seeing how we could partner with others, how can we use the partnerships that we have, the partners we have in this room, in order to do something that's a bit more strategic and more targeted. I don't have specific ideas for how to do that, but I share your view that it's fragmented at the moment and doesn't necessarily have the right level of impact. And I think you will find that Cern would be very happy to see how we can partner within the different frameworks that we have, and again, drawing on the competencies that we specifically have in the networks that we have.
I want to comment on this, that I always think that even the member state should offer a contribution on the education and training. I think it's important. It doesn't, I mean, it can be through Cern, but I think that we should think of some action on a more diffuse level.
I think that's a call to action, which I can only echo. Obviously, when it comes to the education and training programs that are part of Cern, they come through, a lot of this comes through the Cern budget, but also a lot of it through philanthropy, through the Cern and Society Foundation that was created in 2013, which allows us also to go to foundations, also to industry donors to address some of the programs that we don't necessarily have funding for. And some of our member states have stepped up. For example, also for the non-member state summer student program, we've had some of the funding agencies step up and help with that. So I think there is a willingness within member states and associate member states also to support these programs. And I think your call to action is a very pertinent one.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned, of course, the outreach mission of Cern and its societal impact. May I ask you about the project of the gateway? At which stage are we? This is interesting. Of course, it is in Switzerland, therefore you should bring people there, but I think it's very interesting in any case to have such a project linked to a research laboratory.
No, I thank you very much, because that obviously then we'll be here until 12 o'clock. Now that I can speak about the Cern Science Gateway, I think I will delay coffee single-handedly. So the Cern Science Gateway is an innovative research and outreach center that's being constructed on the Cern site. And I think it'll be the only science, if you will, education center of its kind that's really connected with the research infrastructure in the same way, where visitors will be where the science takes place. This will complement the guided tours that we have. We will continue with the guided tours. We will not be able to bring all visitors and guided tours, but we will have innovative hands-on exhibitions. We have doubled the space that we have for educational labs. We will now have programs again for kids down to the age of 5. We like to say that we will have programs from the age of 5 to 105 plus, because we're very ambitious. We open in June of 23. The opening date has now been set for the 20th of June. It's even been announced to the council, so I think it's safe to say that. And we heard also yesterday that we expect for the international year to close. at the Cern Science Gateway in September of 2023. And it really allows us to reach, hopefully, also audiences that we have not been able to touch before. But you touch a very important point, which is how do we make the Science Gateway live outside of the Swiss-French border? Part of it will be a large 900-seater auditorium where we hope to also be linking up with events, for example, in member states and associate member states. We will also now have, because we're repurposing the Globe of Science and Innovation, which has until now had a very nice exhibition called Universe of Particles, and that's being pulled out, and that will be temporary exhibition space. And that will allow us also to have temporary exhibitions, for example, from other fields of science, from other organizations, from our member states, from beyond, thematic exhibitions. So it allows us also to connect our science to different, to other fields and to society in general. So the temporary exhibition space will be one, the connections that we can make. We're also now creating programs, for example, for high school students, camps to come to the Cern Science Gateway so that, again, it becomes something that lives. We've had some interest also from a couple of countries that were interested in having a satellite of the Science Gateway in their countries so that they would be able to connect and they would use some of the exhibition material. So this is something which is still work in progress, but it's very important for us that it lives beyond, through its content, it lives beyond the infrastructure that's at CERN.
Okay, thanks again to Charlotte Veracoul, and for the sake of time, I call Joseph Nimela, ICTP Trieste, International Collaboration for Sustainable Developments. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. And that's me, not him. Okay, thanks very much. I need to talk to the organizers about putting me after two such great talks. That's a tough act to follow. At any rate, I'm Joe Nimela. So I'm going to talk about, in general, international collaborations for sustained development because it's such an important topic. So I put down my physical address, which these days is ICTP. I've been staff member at ICTP since 2003, but I retired about 5 years ago. So I'm kind of, but that's my physical location. They happily gave me an emeritus status, which gives me an office, and I still consult with them quite a bit. So it's, you saw the talk by Sandra, which is a wonderful talk, and it's really a wonderful place to work. If I hadn't gone to ICTP, I would have really missed out on, it just changed my whole worldview. Seriously, if I was still back in a state of Oregon in the United States, I would not be, I would not have the same experiences for sure, but I would just have a completely different global outlook. So anyway, ICTP is a wonderful place. It's also, it also has it's well known in the developing world, perhaps not as well known in the United States as it should be. And I know I talked with the US Ambassador to UNESCO, David Killian, who was a political appointee, and he was at a Cern meeting, and I gave a report on ICTP, and he said, "What is this place? I should know about it." So we brought him there. But at any rate, we're trying to actually broaden our footprint elsewhere in the world as well. And in fact, we've tried to open up ICTP hubs in the United States, perhaps particularly in Texas, to look south. I think that's an important feature for Latin America, but we do have, as Sandra showed, we do have a ICTP center both in Mexico and in Chiapas State and also down in Brazil. All right, so yeah, there's so many interesting discussions that have taken place in this meeting. I mean, somebody brought up the fact of, I'm Novus Faisal, of basic research going towards the Sustainable Development Goals as opposed to more applied technologies. And absolutely, for sure, the applied technologies are the first thing you are really applied towards those goals. But you know, it's part of an ecosystem, and I think that's the only way I know how to look at it. You have to create these scientific ecosystems where in some cases they don't really exist. And so it's part of that. And until I see IBM University, we're still training everybody. And that's usually happening from people doing fundamental research. So, at any rate, yeah, a little light reading in case you're really bored on a Sunday. No, I met a senior editor for physics, Nature Physics, and she really said, well, you know, nobody really understands the SDGs, so, and how it plays a role in physics, so would you mind writing a commentary? And so I did. So if you really want a little light reading, it actually has a history of UNESCO too. So it's just an interesting article. Okay, the last thing is SDGs. It's actually, I'm glad we can just say SDGs and not Sustainable Development Goals, because I went in 2015 to UNESCO, and we had a special, right before our retreat, and we had a special talk from the UN, and the guy was talking about SDGs, and I turned to, I was just coming from ICDP, and I turned to one of the UNESCO colleagues, and I said, oh, what's an SDG? And they said, so at any rate, so even at UNESCO, it took a while. All right, so international collaborations, all right, they come in all sizes, and I'm going to talk about some of those sizes. There's, of course, large-scale institutions, international facilities focused on fundamental problems. We just heard about Cern. Well, they're not exclusively, they're exclusive here. Individual collaborations that span continents and cultures. Collaborations between like and unlike organizations, and for instance, professional societies. We have collaborations between the professional societies, but we also, as Luke showed, we have a collaboration between professional societies and intergovernmental organizations. So those, so you need to find the collaborations where they exist. And then there's international scientific facility. The battery is really dying, with an underlying or additional goal of science for peace. And then there's international years, which also play a great role, and it's a collaborative effort. All right, so I'm going to talk. So we didn't have anybody coming from Sesame, so I volunteered to throw in some slides on and talk a little bit about the Sesame Project, because it is an important project, not only for science for peace or science for understanding and peace, but also as a major institution in the Middle East. And so it's a synchrotron. It's promoting understanding and peace, but at first you can't build something to promote science and understanding. You have to build a scientific institution, because peace and understanding comes later. It comes when people start working together. That's the Cern model. You have people from, our former director always showed pictures of Palestinians with Israelis working at Cern, but they didn't come there to talk about science diplomacy. They came to work on a common passion, and that's our secret. That's the secret of science, actually, that as opposed to other areas, is everybody has the same passion. We don't, as Sandro said, we don't argue about the equations. Well, actually, sometimes we do argue about the equations, but we agree that we can argue about them. But anyway, that's the thing. You have to have a science and a good science center to make that happen. So this is a state-of-the-art, third generation synchrotron. I understand there's fourth generations coming around. But it's the first such center in the Middle East, a major international research center. It's a cooperative venture. It was set up on the model of Cern, so it's an intergovernmental organization. And they've always felt, it's always been a Cern ex-DG, former DG, that's been heading it, because that also gives they know how to run a large international facility, and that was important to keep member states from getting jittery about the leadership. So it was very important. It was developed under the auspices of UNESCO. That just means UNESCO approved it. And kind of owned it, but they don't own it. That's very important, especially when we were looking in the United States for funding. It was not a UNESCO organization. That was a big, important point, because the U.S. cannot give money to UNESCO. All right, so it's an autonomous organization at the service of its members, and they have full control through the council. Okay, so let's see, yeah, okay. So it began with two main goals. The main one, of course, was to foster scientific and technological excellence in the region. And the other was to build these bridges, the cultural bridges between diverse societies and cultures, religions, etc. And I showed a picture here. This is Gìugno, who's the beamline scientist in charge of the infrared beamline. But Gìugno is a really special person, and she's a really A-list speaker. If you can ever get her, do get her. But even before the Sesame came online, quite a long time before, she had a laboratory there, and we worked out a deal with ICDP that they brought Palestinian master's students over just across the border to do their master's thesis work with Gìugno. And Gìugno is actually from Egypt. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And so we had something going on at Sesame before it actually opened, because you never knew when that was going to be. The commissioning day kept sliding, moving forward and forward. All right, so who are the members and why are they called members and not countries? They're not called countries because Palestine, or the Palestinian Authority, is one of the members. And since Palestine is not recognized as a country, everybody's just called a member. That's why it's members. And so you see the list. Cyprus, Egypt, Iran, and Israel, of course, are there, and Palestine and Pakistan. All right, so you have some obvious conflict countries in conflict, and so that's the experiment. It's a miracle that it took off, but it did. There's many observers, including Cern. Cern has been, as you heard, gave quite a lot of money, quite a lot of support, technical support and financing through the technical cooperation to to Sesame. Italy, of course, is a very important observer, and a lot of support has come from the government of Italy, not only from the European Union, but also from INFN, through INFN, and also with the Elettra in Trieste, so the Synchrotron in Trieste, which is a partner of ICDP and IAEA, is one of those, is very important for that. It's a user facility. You have to be good. If you're a user facility, nobody will come unless you have something to offer that's better than the other facilities. And so it has joined this European consortium of Synchrotron, so that's important. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And it's actually the first large accelerator complex to be fully powered by solar energy. So that's a real first. There's a lot of sun in Jordan. And so it's the first world's first carbon neutral accelerator laboratory. I just pointed out that 2 out of the last 3 scientific directors came from Trieste. So there's a real connection to Elettra. All right, so in the beginning, there was a beautiful building given by the Jordanian government, but it was empty except for some delegates to the Sesame Council meetings. But here, picture, this is something that came from Bessie 1. So how did Sesame get started? It got started because Germany donated Bessie 1, which is an obsolete synchrotron, donated it to the collaboration to put somewhere and use it for science for development, science in this developing region. The only thing that really got used was this, with the microtron, which was the injector for the ring. And that's the former ADG of UNESCO. Now the problem is, well, that's where the problem lies. So to get the thing started, you had to get member states on board. And member states saw the gift of a synchrotron. That's a great thing. And so they put money in, they actually formed the collaboration, and everybody was happy. Scientists, on the other hand, a lot of scientists not necessarily involved with that synchrotron, saw the gift of an obsolete synchrotron, not knowing that only the usable parts were going to be used. And that Sesame lost a lot of credibility in the scientific world, including at ICDP. I mean, you could just go anywhere, and you heard in the early days, well, it's just an old junky synchrotron, it'll never get users. But that was not the way it was. But if you had told the member states that you were going to build a state-of-the-art 3rd-generation synchrotron from scratch and just use a few parts from the old one, they wouldn't have signed on in the first place. So it worked out, but you had to spend the next few years convincing the rest of the science, or at least educating the rest of the science community, that really this was a first-rate, world-class synchrotron. All right, so that was that. And then with all the other challenges, believe it or not, there was a big heavy snowstorm in Jordan and the roof collapsed. So that set Sesame back for about a year. So the inauguration, there were a lot of people from all walks of life coming to Sesame. I just want to make a point here. There's the princess and Chris Llewellyn-Smith, who was one of the Cern Director Generals. But there's also Carlos Moedas, who is the EU Commissioner for Innovation and Research. There's the King, etc. But there's also this person you may know, Fabrizio Nicoletti, from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he was also the Director General for Research and Innovation. And there's Fabiola and the ADG UNESCO, Flavia, my old boss. But the interesting thing is both these people later on went into sort of more political careers. So Fabrizio is now ambassador to Panama, and Carlos is the mayor of Lisbon. And actually the message here is actually what works with science and diplomacy is scientists often end up in diplomatic positions, not just those, they also become presidents of countries, congressmen in the US, et cetera. So anyway, that's a beauty. The other picture I show here is the Iranian delegation, and that's Javad Rahigi. And so he was sort of, we ran the training committee, advisory committee for Synchrotron, for Sesame. But he was also president of the Iranian light source facility, which has not been built. Oops, let me go back. Jumped. It is a little bit jumpy. So, there you go. So anyway, just a little bit about science under sanctions. I actually went to Tehran on implementation day because we thought we could get some support for the light source there once the sanctions were lifted. And I even met with this guy, was Dr. Larijani. And so he's actually quite important, and he has a good connection to the purse strings in Iran. So we thought things would be good, but actually sanctions never were lifted. So in 2017, the Iranian delegation came to Trieste to support just building a beamline at Elettra. That's still ongoing. It's actually, we're working on it right now. But that was just to train some scientists to be available once they did have a synchrotron. So the one point, one of the people here is also connected with, or will be, I hope, with the American Physical Society, is Razer Mansouri, and he's the former Deputy Minister of Science. And he told a really wonderful story about how Iran was helped by ICP so much that it's almost a second city. It's considered a scientific city of Iran. But, and also this person, Larijani, so after the revolution, the two of them, Reza and Larijani, and another person, Subhuti, he was a student of Chandrasekhar at Chicago, really started science in Iran and kept it going after the revolution. And that's why you saw on one of Sandra's slides that Iran is an outlier. They have they have a little bit of money, but a lot of science coming out, a lot of good science. So at any rate, that's why, those two people plus Subhuti. All right, so anyway, it is going forward. At least they have a map, but I understood there's some funding coming. All right, so now I'm just going to switch to an individual collaboration. I want to highlight a person because not everybody is made the same way. And so we have this guy, he's really extraordinary. His name is Humberto Cabrera. He comes from Cuba. He went from Cuba to Venezuela, and I met him in Venezuela. Actually, no, I met him at ICDP, and then he invited me to Venezuela. But we've known each other for a long time. He's a wonderful scientist, but he's also always been working with very little money. But he came to ICDP, and he started working, and he works so hard for such little money. This is really an incredible story. And what he's done, and so I'll highlight two people. Here's Jahan Akbar, who's in the KPK region of Pakistan on the border with Afghanistan, so in a very remote area, at a university the Pakistani government created, but they didn't create any labs. So he came up and worked with Humberto, and they worked together on the sort of soft skills we've been talking about how to write a grant proposal. So they worked on a grant proposal during his visit, and he presented it, and he got 30,000 euro. To build a lab. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in Pakistan it is. And he's got the first laboratory at the university he's at. It's the first one ever, which is kind of incredible. The other person is Comlan from Togo, and Comlan became an expert on quantum cascade lasers using mid-IR techniques for spectroscopy, also some very fundamental studies. He was a very timid guy. When I first met him, he was under a different supervisor. He wouldn't say a word. Once he came under Humberto, he couldn't get him to shut up. And he's very knowledgeable. He's one of our experts. So at any rate, he's propelled everything, and I think I like to echo the words of the UNESCO's first DG, Julian Huxley, when he's talking about science and diplomacy. He just said, well, practical demonstration is the best form of education, meaning that there are just a lot of, in the aftermath of World War II, there were a lot of scientists who were getting together and showing that they could work together. And that was the practical demonstration. Okay, here's an example of a big collaboration at the South Pole. The reason I showed it for a couple of reasons. One is that was a nice session, a very beautiful session, actually. It included Luisa Cifarelli talking about Polar Quest at the APS April meeting. And we had a young person chosen by the collaboration that talked about this ice cube. It's a neutrino observatory. And so it's 56 institutions around the world. And these guys spend the winter there. So some of the young people actually stay over for the winter, which is really tough. But at any rate, the real reason I showed it is because that's a really nice picture, and it was one of the photos entered in the Iupac 100 photo contest. Believe it or not, we do have a photo contest to celebrate 100 years of Iupac. This is one of the photos entered. I won't tell you if it's a winner. Okay, finally, I'm going to go to international years. So we had an International Year of Light that we were involved with. So we wanted a legacy. And I think IYBSSD will also want a legacy. Everything, we need to keep the momentum going. That's why there's never too many international years. You have to keep the momentum going, keep education. The people in UNESCO and the UN, they change all the time. There's never a chance to really relax and say, oh, well, we presented everything in 2009. You can't do that. So anyway, we created this International Day of Light, which we thought would be easier. It's run with a skeleton crew, just 3 of us. At any rate, so so it's really a nice global observance. It's a chance to get a message out about science and raise awareness, also about what these light-based technologies can do for society. So we reached out to millions of people since we started in 2018 in 80 countries. And well, maybe it's not, can't really show it anymore, but we got a message from the International Space Station by the Russian cosmonauts who actually gave us a live message at UNESCO from the space station as it was orbiting overhead. All right, so it's a wonderful opportunity. We've really had a great impact. This shows you also what IYBSD will have. It's just this is a smaller unit, but we've reached 22,000 events in 103 countries all around the world. You can see in yellow, and there are various types of activities. There's a lot of things targeted in schools, and that's really underrepresented because if you do something in a school, you usually don't report it. But it's very important, and I think that's one of the things that really intrigues me. When you have a UN observed event, it's an opportunity for teachers to get the permission to actually have a special class to really educate their students on something really cutting edge, which maybe perhaps they wouldn't get otherwise. So it's taking advantage. And there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of the UN. And you see we have lots of sponsors, including a wine producer, which is not too far from here at Asti Spumante area, so Bosca Cellars. So they gave us 50,000 euro worth of wine, which we used in all our events. Bosca also helped us with a young man who was in Evin prison in Iran, charged with espionage, Omid Kokabi, and I know the APS worked very hard to try to get him some relief. And so Bosca actually has a very good connection with the Vatican, and that was kind of a crazy idea, but why not go through the Vatican? Because the Vatican actually has a very close connection with the Ayatollah. But anyway, it didn't work. It was too hot. So highlights, we get a message every year from the UNESCO DG, Ms. Azoulay. So we have a very large global audience, but also quite an active social media presence. And so that's just keeping the message out there. Last year we ran a Trust Science campaign. So we got 5,000 international science leaders, including Nobel laureates, breakthrough prize winners, et cetera, to sign on to this. But this was really a campaign against misinformation. It's not really trust science as a noun, it's trust science as a verb. So the scientific process, the way we actually approach a problem, the way we correct what we know, et cetera. So there's a process, and that's really what we're trying to promote. So we had lots of activities around the world. It really encourages activities, as I said, that would not have probably occurred otherwise. So it's just a good opportunity for students, especially young people, to engage in activities. And you can say it's a waste of time, it's a big political thing, but it's not. Actually, people around the world appreciate it, especially educators, but also people who want to engage with the public. It's a wonderful opportunity. If you didn't have the UN behind you, you might not do it. So, and also with, so we have a good collaboration with International Astronomical Union. We actually work with them on the Secretariat for the Day of Light. And that's where we got all of we borrowed and stole every idea from the International Year of Astronomy in 2009 to form the International Year of Light. But so we have a lot. I guess dark and quiet skies is actually in past tense because now we have satellites zipping around. Okay, just getting near the end here. Light-based technologies and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So, not looking downstream from the breakthroughs that happened, including the blue LED, which got the Nobel Prize in 2014. That has such a huge impact. It's amazing because you got white light from LEDs, which use only a fraction of the energy of an incandescent light bulb. And it allowed lighting to actually happen in remote areas off the grid around the developing world, which could never happen before. Before they had kerosene lamps, they were dangerous, they were getting sick from the fumes because they were in tents, so they were in closed spaces. The LED changed everything. It was a big game changer. You also have photovoltaics, and so now you can have a solar energy portable unit in an off-grid location. And if you're only powering LEDs, that's not much. So you can make it, you can afford it. And so we have affordable lights, we have infrastructure, lasers of photodynamic therapy for cancer treatments, certain skin cancers especially. Just energy, water purification, and desalinization. All these things become much easier with light technology. So it's had a big impact also indoor gardening, urban gardening, especially with LEDs, and also spectroscopy for monitoring food quality. It's very easy to do, it's not expensive. So everything was affordable, it was within reach, and it really helped make a better world by using these technologies. And so anyway, that's, there's many more. And finally, sharing our experience. So we've actually, we're trying to make it easier for others. So we worked with the International Year of the Periodic Table, the Year of Glass, and also the IYBSSD to share what we know, what we found. And that's what happened with us with the Year of Light. We also, people share their experiences, and it makes it easier so you don't go it all alone. And finally, as I said, we even get poetry. So light was actually a wonderful topic because it's not just scientific, it actually is philosophic. It's, you know, it can be anything. We have lots of artists, but even the Director General loves to wax poetic about light. So we're really happy that that's happening because that actually gives us some credibility with the UNESCO. And finally, this is the last. There is a proposal in the pipeline. You just heard about it from John. This is an initiative led by the American Physical Society, the German Physical Society, and many, many more regional, international organizations, academies, et cetera, around the world for an International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. Into 2025, as John said, sort of the 100th anniversary of the formalism of quantum mechanics that allowed all these things that, in fact, I just talked about, they're all quantum technologies, to happen. So at any rate, we've reached attained the endorsement of Iupac. We're moving forward. It's now on to the General Conference of UNESCO and the General Assembly in the UN. It's something it requires you to talk to people that are not scientists. That's actually a skill that not everybody has, but you have to talk, you have to do that. Somebody has to talk. APS does a great job, physical societies, in making that bridge between science and the political world, and you really do have to do that. And by the way, John, one of the things I really like about being in a volunteer leadership position at APS is you get invited to the leadership meeting in January. And one of the great things I like about the leadership meeting, besides the wonderful talks on science communication, et cetera, was that you also have a chance to volunteer to talk to Congress people, to actually have scientists. And I've always gone with a young person, a young graduate student, and I think that's a great thing because you're really usually talking to staffers who are also young. But also for the young people, young scientists, it's a wonderful opportunity to understand, to get that experience, to talk to politicians, to talk to people that are engaged in that public sphere, and try to convince them and find the language, find the way to present it, because it's so important also for their career. So basically everything I believe in is just in career development. I think it's very important for young people to get skills. And in fact, when I talked about Humberto, they get the skills. He teaches them. I should have said this, but he works weekends. He works on the vacations, over Christmas vacation. He does not take a break, and he shows them by example. He really shows by example what it means to be a scientist. You have to really work at it. They only come for 2 months. They all get a publication in a really high-impact journal. Humberto's good at that, but they have to work, and that's the main thing, the work ethic that he shows them. He helps them with the soft skills. He helps them with everything. That's the kind of, so it's career development. And last thing I'm going to say, really, entrepreneurship, I heard it mentioned. I've also done a lot with ICDP. You saw it on Sandro's slides. I think entrepreneurship training is vital, essential for most of the people in most of the countries I've been to, not because you want to turn them into entrepreneurs, because when you write a business plan, you just wrote a scientific proposal. There's nothing different. You have to sell it, and you have to be clear, and you have to make a budget that actually makes sense. And that is not what we always see. So I think it's a wonderful training just for scientists who have no intention. And I remember we were in Pakistan, Islamabad. The planning minister came to open up our entrepreneurship conference, and he said, you know, I think it's so wonderful. We should have all PhDs in Pakistan become entrepreneurs. And I said, no, you can't do that. You have to have, you can't say that all scientists are going to be entrepreneurs. You will have to have many of them being entrepreneurs. So we can't all do basic science. That's not even realistic, but somebody has to. And a lot of people, most people are going to go to industry. In the United States, I think the majority of PhD students end up going to industry or somewhere else besides academia. So you have to prepare them, but you can't say it's not just something that it's going to work out for everybody. I'll say the last thing, I talk to everybody, but I also talk to dancers. So anyway, thanks.
Thanks a lot for this special talk, talking about real human being and relationship that are quite important.
Joe, yesterday we heard about ICDP initiative on training and putting together scientists. I forgot to mention something that maybe I share with you now. Regarding this synchrotron radiation project that some people are pushing in Africa, I think ICDP has the proper policy. You need to build capacity first and after we see. So is there any way you can help that the synchrotron, the light source at Jordan, I don't know how much
the beam is oversubscribed. I guess it's a new facility, so there is a room for other people, many people, to come and use the facility. Is there a way through ICTP to make that one of the light beam is rent by a consortium of African country? The way we try, actually, have difficulty, you may help. For FAIR, that's the idea, is to have African country putting together some contribution in order to have a dedicated access to the facility.
I understand.
I think the Central Radiation in Grenoble had this scheme.
Yep.
You can be a collective membership or something like this. Can you help on that? Because
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so I'm not going to speak for ICTP, but absolutely, it is possible, and that's, I mean, Sesame is a user facility. You do need to create a user community, a good user community in Africa to use the eventual African light source facility, wherever it may be. But I think ICTP could help create that kind of consortium. As any synchrotron, everything goes through a review process. So I think they are, as a dedicated user facility, you can't just take any old application. It's the same for IAEA running beamline at the electric synchrotron or the Indian government. We do have governmental beamlines, and so there are some dedicated hours for members of the scientists coming from India, in that case, or the Czech Republic, or Austria, or IAEA through their member states. But they still have to pass. They have to go through a review process. But and I think he's the expert there. So yeah, go ahead, and you want to add a note.
I think the simplest solution for assisting colleagues from Africa is to try and contact IAEA and find a way to use the beam time that is available in our beamline at Elettra, especially through some kind of a TC project or so. I mean, this will be a straightforward action. To do so, then I would say that AFRA should take the lead and propose something in that respect. The point is that the IAEA itself cannot come to you and tell you what to do. So what we expect is to receive requests for helping people, assisting scientists and so on. In any case, I think this is a good idea that African colleagues can use certain infrastructure to start playing with. Because if this is the big goal is to have a synchrotron facility in Africa someday, you will certainly need experienced people before going that way. Anyway, there is a possibility to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, I think you mentioned yesterday that so Elettra is a collaborating center of IAEA, so that even there is a form besides having the beamline even before that. So there's a lot of mechanisms, I think. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Any other question?
Thank you, Joe. So before asking my question, I would like to confirm that the European Physical Society endorsed its participation to the International Year for Quantum Science and Technologies, and will be very happy to support this fantastic initiative. I wanted to put a question concerning the Science Trust campaign and misinformation that you discussed. How many feedbacks did you receive? How successful it was, according to you? And will it be a follow-up of this initiative?
Well, it was, thanks, that's a good question. No, it was the theme of the year. There was a lot of, actually, it was in context of the pandemic misinformation. That was just one example, but it was a very prominent example. No, we got what we were trying to do was get the buy-in from scientists around the world, and so I think we got that number. So that number was 5,000 scientists actually bought into it and signed on to it to actually as a sign that they supported this kind of action. Whether we come back to it, probably it's not going to go away. I don't know. Maybe APS will do something or EPS will do something again. But I think it's not going to go away.
Well, you have your trust science. We have something called Science Trust, which is actually a program to train members to how to talk to people about science. And so it's a partnership with the American Psychological Association, where people are actually trained as to how to have discussions, actually over social media, where you can have an impact.
Yeah, wonderful. In fact, that was the theme before Trust Science was actually science communication, and where we had experts talking about how to talk to other people. Yeah, that's great. All right, well, Science Trust, I thought it was more of a fund. Okay. Okay, I was right. You got to watch APS.
So if there are no urgent questions, I think it's coffee time
it's coffee
and the time to thank you again.
Okay.
Thanks to all the speakers of the session.